Socius, het steunpunt sociaal-cultureel werk, organiseerde in november 2020 een online trefweek. We hadden politiek filosofe en activiste Chantal Mouffe en kunstenprogrammator Guy Gypens te gast. Chantal Mouffe heeft een eigenzinnige kijk op democratie. In een radicale democratie heb je geen vijanden, maar kan je wel tegenstanders hebben. Het grote gelijk bestaat niet. Er bestaat immers niet voor elk probleem een rationele oplossing. Ook de ecologische crisis is zo'n complex probleem. Chantal Mouffe pleit voor een links populisme, dat groepen uit alle lagen van de bevolking verenigt rond de Green New Deal. Een project dat sociale en ecologische kwesties verbindt. En dat de brug slaat tussen sociale bewegingen en politieke partijen. Alleen zo kan de politiek fundamenteel hervormd worden. Heb jij altijd al willen weten hoe populisme burgers kan verbinden rond sociale en ecologische kwesties? En welke politieke organisatie daarvoor nodig is? Dan is dit gesprek iets voor jou. Veel kijk- en luisterplezier.
Good evening, Chantal. Welcome in our digital space, unfortunately. I refuse to get used to it, but yeah, we have no choice. Let's make the best of it tonight. This presentation and the conversation is part of an event organized by Socius, the organization that represents the social-cultural sector in Flanders. And for all the participants in that event, I will try and introduce you briefly. So Chantal Mouffe is one of the most influential political theorists at work today. Her work on populism and her critique of liberal politics have influenced political parties across Europe to inform and continues to inform the direction of left politics. So like no other, Chantal knows how to question the consensus thinking of the so-called third way, and she defends a conception of democracy that does not focus on reconciliation or dialogue, but on conflict. Chantal Mouffe was born in Charleroi, studied philosophy at the University of Leuven, and then moved to Paris to study with Louis Althusser. And in 1995, together with Ernesto Laclau, she published Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, a fantastic, very important book that challenged left-wing political thinking at the time and that made Mouffe and Laclau internationally known. In Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, they attempted to break with Marxism that in their view had become stuck in rigid economist schemes and therefore had no connection with the new social movements that the uprisings of the 60s and the 70s had produced. The remedy they proposed, instead of striving for the dictatorship of the proletariat, liberal democracy had to be embraced, not in order to accept it indiscriminately, but in order to radicalize it and to radicalize the principles on which that democracy was based, freedom and equality for all. In the past 10 years, Chantal Mouffe published a lot of very interesting books like On the Political, 2011, Agonistics, Thinking the World Politically, 2013, and then recently for a left populism that will certainly pop up today in our conversation in 2018, and this year, The Return of the Political. Chantal Mouffe has always been a political thinker who takes an explicit position, and I have no doubt that she will do that tonight as well. So Chantal, recently you have been writing and lecturing about why a populist left should rally around a green democratic transformation. If left-wing populism is to prevail, you say, it must organize itself around the project of an ecological transition, or as you call it, a Green New Deal. May I ask you to start with a presentation of the key ideas behind this alliance between left populism and a Green New Deal?
Okay, well, thank you, Guy. So yes, in this book for left populism, I've presented the main line of the strategy. which I advocate for left politics, and I say it should be in terms of left populist. In this presentation, what I want to do is to examine how such a strategy should be envisaged in the current conjuncture. Current conjuncture, of course, which is one of social, ecological, and economic crisis. Because I think my reflection is not something purely theoretically, but always I think one needs to start from a conjuncture. Althusser, speaking about Machiavelli, say Machiavelli is somebody who works in the conjuncture, not above the conjuncture. And this is very much how I understand my work. And so this is why, I think that we always need to start from a conjuncture. But before going to that, I would like, for people who are not too familiar with my work, to remind you of a few points which are really very important for understanding my argument. Because populism, in the way I use it, and of course here I'm influenced by the work of Ernesto Laclau in his book, The Populist Reason, is not a regime, is not an ideology, it does not have any specific, content, ideological content, but it is a strategy of construction of the political frontier. That is the way you construct the us-them. And I take this construction of the us-them as being absolutely constitutive of politics. So that is, I inscribe myself in conception which is called a dissociative conception of politics. Politics has got to do with conflict, with antagonism, and it's always, construction of us, them. So that's really is what is important for me in the understanding populism. But of course, the us, them, and I think that this something which is very can be constructed in different ways. But for instance, liberalism does not construct us them. For them, there is no antagonism in society. We can all, reconcile to try to find consensus. Marxism does construct a frontier, but it constructs a frontier in terms of proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And that's where the difference lies with populism. Populism constructs the frontier in terms of the people from below and the people from above. That is, we can translate that in terms of the people and the establishment. I prefer, in fact, the term oligarchy, but it is, so a different way in which the us and the them is constructed. And here, of course, I want to insist on the last point, is that, and of course, according to the way this is constructed, you can distinguish between right-wing populism and left-wing populism. And I want to insist on one thing, because there are many misunderstandings with respect to that. This us, them, they are not sociological categories. They are always political construction. So this is not something that corresponds to, as I say, empirical references that will need to be represented. They are constructed through the political discourse. And this is why it can be constructed in a way which will lead to right-wing populism or left-wing populism. And obviously, what I define is a conception of populism which understood in terms of a left-wing populism. And that will, the difference, let's say, will be that for a right-wing populism, it tends to restrict democracy, to understand the us in a very, limited way, normally basically limited to the national, while left populism is much more inclusive. The us of the left populism includes sayers of different categories. And for instance, obviously, one of the big difference between right-wing populism and left-wing populism consists in where to put the immigrants. For right-wing populism, the immigrants are not part of the us, while for left-wing populism, it is. That's, I think, it's of course a very important question. But so the way in which the us, the people, the collective will is constructed by left populism is by federating a series of democratic demands, the demand of the working class, of course, but the demand of the new social movement, the demand of all those people who are in fact fighting against form of discrimination, exploitation, domination, and we are trying to establish a chain of equivalence between those demands. Chain of equivalence is something that we develop in hegemony and socialist strategy. the way in which, you are going to create some form of, let's call it unity in diversity. This is what is the question. So this is very much important for left populism. And also something which is important is that left populism try to establish a synergy between what we can call horizontal demand, the demand of the new movement, and a more vertical form of popular struggle, the one would take place, for instance, within the parliamentary system. So in fact, it's to use a vocabulary that was, fashionable many years ago. It's not so fashionable anymore, but it's when we were speaking about parliamentary and extra-parliamentary struggle, and left populism precisely establish a synergy between parliamentary and extra-parliamentary struggle. That's very important because it's a difference with many other form of left politics. Okay, so now let's come to what is the specificity of the current conjuncture, and how should we envisage the construction of this chain of equivalence today? Well, I think that one of the main characteristics of the current conjuncture, of course, is that there is an enormous demand for protection. Here I refer to the work of Karl Polanyi in his book, The Great Transformation. Polanyi, of course, it was reflecting to a different kind of period. It was writing about situation in the 30s, the crisis of the 30s. And the argument is making, and I think it's very important, because we are today in an analogous situation. Polanyi was saying, when a society is in condition in which, there is an important transformation, that kind of, crisis of different type, then in fact there is society tend to react against, to protect itself. The demand for protection in those circumstances of big, social political transformation is precisely this increased demand for protection. And this is what I find very interesting in the argument of Polanyi, is say that this demand is not necessarily progressive. This demand can be articulated in ways which are anti-democratic. And of course, the example he gives is that the crisis of the 30s, we had, of course, a progressive answer to that, which was Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, but that's also other authoritarian or non-progressive. For instance, there was the development of fascism, Nazism, and of course also Stalinism. So in fact, this demand for protection can be articulated in many different ways. And I think that this is what is so important for us to understand today, because we are exactly in an analogous condition because of the social, ecological, and economic crisis that we are living. For instance, we are clearly seeing already some kind of way to deal with this crisis with authoritarian solution. For instance, here we can distinguish, for instance, the demand which of authoritarian state neoliberalism, as I will call it, the neoliberal parties are now trying to use the power of the state in order to reassert the predominance of capital in the current conjuncture. And of course, that is buttressed by authoritarian measure. But we also have another type of answer, which is also very authoritarian, even if it's a different type, which is right-wing populism. In fact, both those movements, they do deal with this demand for protection. But in the case of right-wing populism, it is closer the border, leads trying to establish some kind of immunitary nationalism. In the case of states neoliberalism, it is basically some kind of technological authoritarianism. And this is why for the GAFA are so important, and the idea of solutionism, that there are always ways that we can resolve all those questions technologically. So this is what we have at the moment already to tentative to deal with the present crisis, but given authoritarian solution. And I think that is very important for the left to understand this situation. And to address the question of protection. Because there's some tendency on the left to say, oh, but protection, that's necessarily regressive. It leads to authoritarian, nationalistic things. Well, it can be the case, but this demand for protection need to be addressed. Because if we don't give some kind of progressive answer to this demand, then of course we are leaving the terrain for authoritarian demands. And so this is why I want to insist, and this is where I will come with the argument about the green democratic transformation. The left need to address this demand for protection in a way which is going to orient it towards a deepening of democracy instead of a retreat into authoritarian solution. And I think that this is important to realize that this climate emergency, as we call it, is something that can be addressed in many different ways. I always argue that ecological demands are not necessarily progressive. They can be dealt with in authoritarian ways. And for instance, we can easily imagine some kind of very authoritarian solution to the climate emergency. So it's very crucial for the left to imagine, we can deal with this crisis, which of course, what is at stake, in fact, is to secure the protection of society and its material condition of existence. So this is really something where protection is crucial. And my proposal is in fact to say that for the left, to address this crisis in a way which is going to empower people to lead to a deepening of democracy is to envisage this ecological transition on the mode of what I call a green democratic transformation. That is to develop a narrative in which this really challenge, which is the climate emergency, is dealt with in a way in which people we are going to mobilize the question of hope. Because Spinoza used to say that in politics there are two main passions. There is the passion, of fear or hope. And of course, one can perfectly deal with this ecological crisis with, fear. And in fact, it's the way in which most people try to, protect themselves. But it can also be dealt with in a way in which people are going to say, well, this is finally an opportunity to create a different kind of society. And I think that this is what I understand by the green democratic transformation. We need to create a narrative, and of course I know it's not easy, but I think it's absolutely crucial, in which people feel that this crisis is more an opportunity to really transform our way of life and to bring about a society in which there will be much more social justice, condition of living, really people feel it's going to give them a better world. And this crisis, of course, in fact, then need to be dealt with in a way in which people need to generate enthusiasm instead of, say, oh my God, it's terrible. No, we need to create enthusiasm by showing the potentialities of this climate emergency, the way in which it can be dealt, in a way what is going to deepen democracy. This idea of what I call the green democratic transformation, or if we think of it in terms of the measure, of course it has got much to do with the Green New Deal developed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Sunrise Movement in the US. And I think that is what I find very interesting in this model is the way in which they are proposing to deal with the measures which are necessary in order to protect the society, from the climate emergency, but articulating that with struggle against inequalities, social economic inequalities, but also against the racial, anti-racist way, and also feminist. So I think that's very important, because this is the way in which people are going to feel that this ecological transition is going to bring them a better world. And for instance, I think that one of the measure which is very important is the fact that they propose that the state will guarantee a job, a good job, well paid, and in people, all the people who are going to be affected by this democratic, transformation, ecological transformation, because it's clear that it's not easy to bring about the popular classes to this idea, because they feel that this is going to really destroy some of the jobs, create conditions of existence. And this is why in many countries it's very difficult to find the way in which you can mobilize the popular classes and the working class in defense of the green transformation. But if you show that those jobs which are going to be destroyed are going to be replaced by better jobs in which people are going to see better condition of living, of course, I think that it's a way in which we can win the adhesion of the popular sector. So this is absolutely central for me. And I think that from the point of view of the measure which are need to be taken is central. The question of articulating, the measures which are, for instance, again, the order of decarbonize the economy, but in a way which is also going to bring about more social justice and to fight, again, many forms of domination. Well, why do I not just simply defend a Green New Deal? But of course, I defend the Green New Deal, but why do I propose to call that, to envisage it in the mode of a green democratic transformation? Because I think that, let's say, the Green New Deal by itself is not necessarily something which is going to mobilize passion, to create affects in which people are going to feel that, they create enthusiasm about that program. And here I want again to refer to Spinoza, because I think that Spinoza used to say, ideas by themselves do not have power. They only have power when they are meet affects. You speak, I don't know, you said in English, idée affectante, And I think that, again, this is something which I find generally a big problem with the left. The left believe that it's enough to have a good program, good ideas, and then automatically, people are going to accept it. That's not the case. You can, if good ideas by themselves, a good program is not going to gain the adhesion of the people. So you need to create a narrative which is going to generate enthusiasm about that program. And this is, why I propose to speak of a green, or to envisage this Green New Deal in terms of the green democratic transformation. Because I believe, and of course this is something which was already present in hegemony socialist strategy, to which a guy referred at the beginning, the power of the democratic imaginary in our societies is something which is crucial. We can see, in fact, that all the advances towards social justice have been moved by the democratic imaginary, and the democratic imaginary. We can see, for instance, several steps in this, what is being called the democratic revolution. Democratic revolution first was, of course, envisaged in terms of right for voting, civil rights. Then the democratic revolution moved to another thing, which was, fighting also for economic equality. Well, we've not yet arrived that exactly, but of course, there have been very big progresses. And of course, this is the idea of socialism. Socialism is, the development of the democratic revolution in the field of the economy. I think that today we are really in a third move, which is the moment in which the democratic revolution really exact the necessity of putting into question the danger which the climate represents for the society. The fact that, let's say, before we were seeing progress, economic progress in terms of something which was positive, necessarily, and thinking that more and more production was going to create more goods and better redistribution of those goods. Today, we are understanding that, in fact, this productivist model is something which is putting us in danger. So we need to understand that there is also a need to transform this imaginary and to envisage a different mode of production, which is more based on the idea of precisely, economic justice, but also a different form of life. So I think that this is this green democratic transformation. This is what I understand by that, to envisage, different, we can't go on with this productivist model. We need to envisage a different mode of social coexistence. And I think that, I know it's not something easy, but I can imagine how a lot of people can get enthusiasm about that. Definitively, I think that there are the question in which the feminist movement is very much correspond to those demands. There are many demands in society which could feel that they are going to be satisfied by this kind of society which the green democratic transformation is offering us. And I think that this project around which the chain of equivalence can be established. By chain of equivalence, we need, as I was saying before, to establish the way in which a very heterogeneous struggle are going to find that they've got a project in common. And this project in common, I think that it should be the green democratic transformation. So this is why I propose to see the green democratic transformation as what I call the hegemonic signifier, the way in which different, very heterogeneous groups are going to feel, okay, but we've got this project, this struggle in common. And I think that in the current circumstances, this is definitively something which should be the way in which a left project should be understood. So a new step, an advance in the radicalization of democracy, which is definitively what is the aim of a left populist movement, but understood it really in a way in which going to meet the challenge created by the climate emergency. Just to find things to finish it, because there is sometimes, really confusion. This Green New Deal and green is completely different from the green transition. Well, I don't know whether they call it the Green Deal of the United, the UEA. The thing in which the European Commission is, that is not, and we should not see that the same thing, because what is important in the green democratic transformation, and this is what characterizes it as a left populist project, is that there is an adversary there. And the adversary is obviously financial capitalism, because I'm absolutely convinced that we are not going to be able to bring a solution to the ecological crisis if we don't put into question capitalism, and particularly financial capitalism. They are the ones who are responsible for the acceleration, not of course at the origin, but they've been in the 30 last year, a big acceleration of the problem, and that's because of financial capitalism. So this, if you don't put into question financial capitalism, I mean, you can't possibly have a solution to the ecological crisis. And I also think that is the reason why I'm very suspicious about many ecological parties, because those parties are very much, what they say, we are neither right nor left, and they are in fact very much compatible with form of maintenance of capitalism. So this is, and again, this is what is specific about the left populist strategy. There is an adversary, and the adversary must be addressed. And that's also something that, creates some form of commonality among all those different heterogeneous demands, that they are all fighting in order to put an end to neoliberal hegemony and create another hegemony, which will create the condition for radicalization of democracy. So I really feel that today, in a sense, there is a challenge, but it's a challenge that, the left need to address, and it's a possibility that we are going to create the condition for radicalization of democracy. But there is also the danger that this demand for protection is articulated by, technological neoliberalism or by radio. So it is really a moment in which, it's a decisive moment. A lot of possibilities, but a lot of danger too. That's it.
Thank you very much, Chantal. Thanks for this passionate defense of the Green New Deal and left populism. I want to maybe immediately go on this notion of democratic imaginary and the importance that you give to it. If I look at Extinction Rebellion as an ecological movement, you see also in Extinction Rebellion more and more that they use this democratic imaginary to create a base for their movement and for their demands. In France, but also here in Belgium, they ask for a different kind of democratic process, deliberative processes. So you see there, I see that to give it a little bit of a broader perspective in terms of activist action in society, not just the ecological, but that they want to reach out, for instance, in France to the Gilets jaunes, this democratic imaginary becomes very important. But my question is, at the same time, Extinction Rebellion is very radical in its approach to democratic institutions. Your thinking is with existing democratic institutions. You're not like Negri and Hart taking a step away from it. You really want to work within the institutions, but something like a movement like Extinction Rebellion, they are much more radical. They say, no, we want to have really alternatives. We want to step away from the institutions. Are you not afraid this more radical political energy that you're going to miss out on it if you stick to the, let's say, the working from within, as you call it?
No, I don't think. But, well, first, we should not oppose, Extinction Rebellion to a left populist strategy, because as I insisted, left populist strategy is a way to try to establish a synergy between a series of movements like Extinction Rebellion or Friday for the Future, or a lot of, and the more parliamentary aspect. So it's not, for instance, when the traditional left politics will see, the left Extinction Rebellion. No, we not know. I think that in the case of left populism, there is really an attempt to work together. But I think, but of course it's something on which I've written in agonistic French, and I've got a chapter where I distinguish between, I think, the strategy of desertion and strategy of involvement. And I think that precisely Hart and Negri, to whom you refer, they propose a strategy of desertion, of exodus. Let's not work within the institution. Let's create parallel, a completely different kind of society, because we believe that the state will disappear. Well, we've not seen so far many advances of that. And I think that for me, they are two strategies which are clearly, not going to produce anything very positive, because either the strategy who believe that only through social movement are we going to transform, power in society, we don't have any example of that, because, for instance, look at what happened with Indignados in Spain, or this Occupy Wall Street, all those things. But Indignados in Spain, for instance, what is interesting is to see that it is because they created an impulse, but it is only because it was later taken by Podemos, and they try to link that to a more traditional politics, that the movement kept maintain itself, because we must remember that in the case of Indignados, there was incredible agitation and very successful in Spain during several months. Then, of course, it really, lost a little bit of its impetus. And then there were general elections in Spain, and for the first time in many years, the Partido Popular, the right, gained an absolute majority. And it's the moment when those people from the Universidad Complutense in Madrid decided, no, but we can't possibly leave all that, to disappear. We need to mobilize, to direct this energy towards the transformation of the institution. And they created Podemos. And of course, you will tell me, okay, they did not manage, to completely transform society, but, at least, they are in coalition with the PSOE, and they are pushing the PSOE more to the left. So some kind of, for instance, it's clear that, say, yes, of very positive measure of Pedro Sanchez are been done because of Podemos. Well, in the case, for instance, of Occupy Wall Street, well, the movement was important. So we have never seen any real important transformation only on the basis of social movement, this kind of, purely extra-parliamentary. On the other side, the other solution, which is, no, we should only work through the institution, of course, is not either. This is why I think that it's important to articulate the struggle between, inside the institution and outside, to establish a synergy. And this is precisely the specificity of left populism and the difference, for instance, with that and traditional, social democratic politics. So I don't see that we are going to lose the radicality of movement like Extinction Rebellion. Well, Extinction Rebellion by themselves are not really going to produce any real fundamental transformation. They need, you need to, in our societies, I'm sorry, you might not like it, what a pity, but, kind of direct democracy, we've never seen any real important advances which have been made through that direction. It's always has been, articulation between when they were moments in which, for instance, those social movement and parties there were not many of those moments, but when there were those moments articulating the struggle, then you've seen advances, So this is for me absolutely crucial, the articulation between this. I understand that it's not easy, but I think that it's for instance, you were referring to Gilets jaunes. Again, I think that's another example of a situation in which a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm does not produce anything because they refuse completely to have any kind of articulation in terms of more, let's say, traditional politics. They did not want to have anything to do with any party. They did not even want to have spokespeople. They were thinking, no, okay, what happened with the Gilets jaunes? Well, they were really, an important movement, but it died down, So I think that we have many examples in which those movements, if they don't articulate with more, what I call vertical kind of politics, they don't produce any important transformation. Maybe, and I think it's not negligible, a transformation in terms of the common sense. For instance, I would definitively recognize that in the case of the Occupy Wall Street, they did not manage, to have any successes, but they transformed don't show if the democratic imaginary or certain people, For instance, now in the US, you've got the question of struggle for equality is much stronger than it was before. And probably they created a condition that were favorable for the development of Bernie Sanders movement. But it's only when those movements meet with more traditional kind of politics that they create real advances.
Yeah, I do agree, and one of the reasons why I ask is, of course, that in our environment, the cultural world, there's a lot of horizontal movements. They're very radical horizontality, and there's also a kind of allergy towards verticality. That's why I asked the question. But I wanted to ask also something about the other side, about political parties. What we also see is that political parties are themselves less and less really well organized structures. They become more and more movements. Green parties, like you said, were always a little bit more movement-like, less really structured political parties. Social democratic parties, socialist parties had a very strong tradition of very good organization. But you see now also that some of those parties are less well organized or less structured, less vertical, you could say. Do you see, how do you see that development? What role can these traditional political parties play besides trying to copy the energy or trying to absorb the energy of the activists and the horizontal, and not being able to really structure it into something vertical?
Well, I think that here one needs to examine the situation in different countries, because, for instance, I have, this is something which I recognize, my thinking have been changing, and some people have in fact told me, but what you are arguing in agonistic is different from what we are going now in for left populism. And it's true, because in fact, when I wrote agonistic, 2005, it was published. At that moment, I still had the illusion that social democratic parties could really be transformed. My argument at that moment was because, of course, I was arguing against, the Blair and Schroeder idea that we are now beyond left and right, and that this, and I was arguing, no, we need to. Social democratic parties need to recover their left identity. This was my argument at that time. But then, I must say that the 2008 crisis for me was a moment of reckoning, because if you think about it, it was the moment where if the left social democratic parties maintain a little bit of the radical, well, not even very radical, but at least the some of the ideas, they could have taken advantage of that crisis to do what FDR did in the US, to reinforce to take the situation in a more redistributive manner, because till then, the state was demonized. No, the state. And then suddenly, of course, in 2008, there was a call for the state to come to the rescue. And the state came to the rescue, but of the bank. They did not take that as an opportunity to create more redistributive policies. And at that moment, I realized, well, social democratic parties are beyond the pale. They have been too much compromised by neoliberalism, because obviously, they had accepted, and that's the specificity of the third way, that there was no alternative to neoliberal globalization, that the only thing they could do was to, humanize a little bit neoliberalism. But they, in fact, in many countries, have been very complicit in the very establishment of neoliberalism. And at that moment, I thought, well, no, you can't really expect them to turn against neoliberalism, no. Because obviously my argument was when to say, let's recover your left identity and let's abandon, this idea that there was no alternative and fight against neoliberalism. That was my argument in agnostic. And I said, no, it's impossible. They are not, Well, but I was proven wrong on one aspect, particularly, for instance, in the UK, because in fact, and that I can see of course, we are at the moment not a particularly good state for that, but the radicalization of the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, show me that there was still the possibility sometime for social democratic parties to recover their left identity. You will tell me, well, but Corbyn lost the election. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean that, it's definitively need abandon the project of left populism. And in fact, they are, and I'm obviously in contact with people who were in the Corbyn groups who say, no, the mistake in the last election was not to have defended a left populist strategy. We defended it in 2017, but we abandoned that there because there were a lot of course, the problem of the Labour Party is that the Blairites are still very, very powerful there. But so you can see that there is the possibility for a social democratic party under certain conditions to, let's say, adopt a left populist strategy, because left populism, as I was saying, is a strategy. So it can be a strategy of a party which is, more traditional, can at some moment transform itself and adopt a different strategy. So I think that is really important too. But in general, I believe that most social democratic parties, I mean, in fact, I think that to call them social democratic is even too much, because those parties, if I think, for instance, of the Socialist Party under François Hollande, that was nothing social democratic about that. It was pure social liberalism. And, you see that it depends. In different countries, the social democratic parties, for instance, I have the impression, but of course, I've been out of Belgium for a long time, that the socialists in Belgium are certainly more in the line of the really traditional, so more radical social democracy. They have not yet become completely social liberals. So there will be difference definitively between, the Socialist Party in France and the Socialist Party in Belgium. They are not yet, Corbynite, but so that depends very much on the different conditions. But in general, it's true that, let's put it, I think for me, those parties will only survive. Of course, they can, go on existing, but they can only have a possibility of transforming society if they adopt a left populist strategy. And it's something which is possible. It was clearly the case with the Labour Party. So with the Green parties, as I was saying in my talk, I don't really believe that those parties are going to play a very important role in the struggle against neoliberalism, because they are too. Honestly, I don't know so much about the Green Party in Belgium, but if you look, for instance, of the Green Party in Germany, or the Green Party in Austria, I mean, those are parties that are making, usually coalition with right-wing populist parties. And in France, for instance, of course, the Green Party is very heterogeneous, but the people like Yannick Jadot are completely, as we call, Macron compatible, So I think that what the Green Party lack is a clear understanding that the kind of struggle that they want to pursue it necessarily imply putting in question neoliberalism and particularly financial capitalism. But there are not many green parties that adopt that view, So this is why, for me, really, I think that the only alternative for the left to really be in condition to present an alternative to right-wing populism or to neoliberalism is by adopting a left populist strategy.
We are, of course, here in a cultural environment. Socios is coordinating a cultural sector, the social cultural organization. We are in a sort of civil sphere, civil society. If we talk about horizontalism and vertical tendencies, or the necessity to bring also a kind of verticality in this horizontal energy, of course, we can also look at civil society, and a lot of those movements that we talk about, social movements, citizens organizations, also there you see that traditional organization of that civil society that was more in pillars, the traditional pillars that we had, especially in Belgium, is now, it's much more diverse, it's a bit atomized. Organizations like Socios, but also a lot of social cultural organizations in the field, they try to make links within civil society. Do you see an importance and also a potential for this necessary vertical aspect of, let's say, the horizontal political energy that you refer to? Do you see a role for civil society organizations and social cultural organizations?
Yeah, definitively. No, I think that they are very important. And in fact, what make, me, I wouldn't say very optimistic, but at least not too pessimistic, is to see that there is, even on one part, obviously, parties are not doing well, but it doesn't mean that people are not interested in politics. That they are not mobilized. They are mobilized a lot, but they are mobilized through precisely a lot of civil society initiatives. They are a lot, for instance, in terms of the environment. There are a lot of things which are happening. For the ZAT or thing, for instance, it's clear that in the US, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was very much, her project came from the green sunrise movement, that it was a social, but that's a very interesting example, because you see a group which is a social movement suddenly, can have importance and can articulate with a more traditional politics. So there is an alliance between Ocasio-Cortez in the Democrats and the Sunrise Movement, because they brought forward a lot of ideas. I think that the civil society movement are particularly important because they are a breeding ground for many radical ideas, that is much more than the traditional parties. But then it's important that those ideas try to find a way to express themselves in the more traditional political movement. And this is, my view of this green democratic transformation is precisely a way in which this will be a way to federate all those different groups. By federating, I'm not saying that they should all enter into a party. Obviously, I think it's very important that they maintain their specificity, their thing, but to try to find a way to what I call creating a chain of equivalence. We've got this common adversary, and we are going to fight together. We are going to establish this against that enemy or good adversary, as you want. I think I think that the for me the crucial task today is how is it going to possible to federate, to articulate, to mobilize all those different initiatives in a way in which this is going to have impact in the political system. Because as long as you've got this separation between the traditional politics on one side and the traditional parties and things like that, and on the other side, a lot of civil society movement that do not find a way in which they can unite, for instance, on let's imagine not to joint initiative, for instance. I don't know the situation in Belgium, but if you can to unite in defense of a project of law, for instance, that will be presented by a party in parliament. And of course, this is the left of the party. It's important that they work also within the representative system, because it is in that way that they are going to be able to have transformation of law, establishment. But, it is very important for me that different, civil society alternative unite around and say, okay, we are going to, for instance, taking the example of which I know best, which is the case of France and La France Insoumise, and different ways in which there is some kind of alliances which are made with different social movements with La France Insoumise to present a project in parliament. The problem, and it's a big problem, is that it's not those people in the social movement, they believe that if they are going to fight and unite with the parties, they are going to be utilized, that they are going to lose their specificity. There is a lot of mistrust between the social movement and the parties, and I understand it perfectly, But this is something that needs to be fought. We need to create a different common sense, to use the idea of Gramsci. Well, again, come to Spain. That's a good example, because the Podemos, when they decided to, try to recuperate all the political agitation of the indignados, the indignados divided, because some of them, many important sector of the indignados, joined Podemos, and enter another sector. They say, oh, no, we are going to be recuperated. No way, we don't want to have anything to do with parliamentary politics. And of course, this is a pity, because I think that it's very important to not lose that energy. I mean, there are many other examples I can give you. For instance, in Argentina, the same thing happened with the piqueteros when Kirchner got the government. He offered them, he came to the government, work with me, Piqueteros accepted, and they voted, and other ones, no, we don't want anything to do with institutional politics. That's a big problem today, the mistrust that exists between the social movement and traditional parties. And I do understand, the reason for that. And I sympathize with many of those reasons. But I think that is a real problem. And I think that is very important. Parties, and of course, when I think of parties, for me, I think, party, the way I understand, the left populist thinks it's not a traditional party, it's not really a movement, it is an articulation, the way in which I envisage it, an articulation between the two. But it's By the way, that's also an important aspect in Britain. For instance, the way in which momentum, which was something created, it's a social movement. It's not in the Labour Party, but what work, the idea was to work precisely with Labour and of course with the Corbynite in order to, direct many of the social movement towards a transformative politics at the level of the state. So I think we've got example. I think we've got also example of that in the US, which people who work, jointly with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which are not necessarily in the Democratic Party, who are in fact rather antagonistic with the Labour, the Democratic Party, but want to establish some form of alliance. I think that, and for a green democratic transformation, that is crucial, because this green democratic transformation needs to find a way in which the multiplicity of initiatives which are already existing, around the ecological crisis, then you need to empower them. You need to find a way in which those alternatives are going to make an impact on the political system. I think that the only way in which we are really going to be able to have laws and transformation. But let's say, I know I am perfectly aware of the difficulty, but I think we need to fight to create, this new imaginary in which people will realize that this it's a common project in which you can fight together. People that are in social movement and people who are in parties, they feel that they've got a common objective. And I think I will want to address here, because I've not had any chance to speak about that yet, but for me it's very important. And I think in the case of, I don't know so much about socius, but I do believe that artistic practices can play a very important role in that transformation of the common sense. Because again, to come back to what I was saying about Spinoza, when Spinoza say ideas by themselves, they don't have any power. They need to meet affects. And I think that, and this is why I'm particularly very interested in artistic practices, because artistic practices are the place where ideas and affect can meet. Because artistic practices are a way to mobilize affects towards somebody. To this junction, is very important. It's not the same, the only place, but I think it's one of the privileged terrain for establishing, this synergy between ideas and affect, because artistic practices are precisely, practices that address the affects, and I think that is very important in this struggle for creating the imaginary of a green democratic transformation, to mobilize artistic practices in order to contribute to this new vision of a society in which people will feel that, they are addressing the challenge of ecological transition, but in a way in which it's going to create much better condition of life, in a way in which they are going to be empowered. I think that's very important.
Yeah, what one forgets, of course, is that in the Roosevelt's New Deal, culture played an important role. He had a program for cultural workers in his works progress administration. He really put, it was of course around skills mainly. There's this idea of giving people the opportunity during the crisis in the 30s to keep their skills going and to not forget what they were able to do. And he created an affect for those skills by including musicians, writers,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Send them all over the country to show the people their skills. Maybe
Yeah, I do believe that this is what we need. The example of the New Deal is something that we can learn a lot from that, you know, and also the fact that, and I've discussed that a lot with some friend of mine in the US, particularly with Frances Fox Piven, who have written about that. And she was saying, well, we know that, but for instance, when FDR came to power, he was not particularly radical, you know. It is because he was pushed by the social movement that he was really pushed by the social movement to become more radical. So I think that, you know, this is something that we can really, we should follow that example.
You have hope for Biden then? With Alexandra Ocasio?
No. I am absolutely sorry. Well, I don't see. Let's say the good thing about Biden is that, you know, we got rid of Trump. But I think that there is a danger, and in fact, there was. I don't know if you know the work of Thomas Frank, which I think he just published a very, very good book about the populism, in showing that, in fact, the tradition, the progressive tradition in the US all the time, it's been the populism. And he was publishing an article in The Guardian last week and saying, well, you know, if no, the solution is to come back to, you know, pre-Trump, come back to the politics of Obama. Well, we must realize this is that kind of politics which led to Trump, you know. So I think that we should not see at all this. Of course, it's a relief, but if there is, for instance, and I'm not terribly optimistic about it, but if an important role is not given, for instance, to the left of the Democrat, if they don't follow, you know, the lead of Ocasio-Cortez and the squad and implement, you know, more radical policies, I think that, you know, they are not going to really create conditions which are impede the comeback of Trump, in fact, or another Trump, you know, because the question, and as we've seen also in the result, of course, Trump was defeated, but he really got, you know, a lot of support. So it's still there. So I think that clearly it's not by coming back to the kind of Obama, Clinton kind of policies that one is going to defeat and give a solution to that problem. No, definitively. But let's say maybe if Ocasio-Cortez and the you know, left Democrats managed to maintain the impetus of that was created around the candidature of I was going to Sanders. Well, they can. Yeah, let's be a bit optimistic. I mean, well, you were probably asking, I don't really believe that we can see know what has happened in the case of FDR, because people still are too much thinking that, oh my God, no, the problem has been solved. You know, we've gone back to normality. But yeah, at least I think that if there is a pressure of the social movement, we can have Biden, which is not to be a centrist as he was normally. He will be pushed by this, the hope that he will be pushed a little bit, you know, towards accepting more progressive politics. So that's something that I will not discard. But we can't expect, something like the New Deal. That will be a bit too, probably a bit too early for that. I don't know.
Not yet. The next one.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, Chantal, we have already spoken for an hour, a bit more even, so time flies. There were a lot of things to ask you, but this was the time that we had. I want to thank you very, very much for this passionate defending of left populism and the Green New Deal. I hope that the people that are watching this linked to Socius will get something out of it for their own practice, for their own activities, and that they can play a role in this difficult, as you say, but necessary construction of an alliance between all the progressive and solidarity forces in our society. Thank you very much, and hopefully we can see each other live soon, somewhere.